Hello, on News Laundry today we have with us Antara Dev Sen, editor of The Little magazine. And The Little magazine is an independent magazine that publishes essays on literature and other social comment. Tell me, why does The Little magazine need to pick up issues that typically mainstream media should be picking up?
Basically because mainstream media has its own logic. And that logic is a logic of maximizing profit and reaching the largest number of people and all of that.
But they aren't being able to do that either. It's all the news channels are in the red.
That they'll have to think about. Not all of them are in the red. A lot of them are, that's true. I think there is a tendency to go overboard also. If we think that this is a winning formula, we sort of go at it to the extent that it ceases to be a formula that works. And also, if everybody is doing the same thing, then you also don't have much.
What logic
of
does
an
The Little
advantage.
magazine work on?
It's the logic of passion and what should be done. It's what I would like to read, I don't get to read, therefore I would like to see it in a magazine. That's how we started The Little magazine.
And how does it sustain itself? It doesn't have to go through any patches of red where there's fears of it shutting down.
We're almost always in the pink, if not entirely red, but The Little magazine
But not in the pink of health in that sense.
No, the Little magazine was never looking at making a lot of profit. It wasn't even looking at making much profit. It was looking at breaking even, which we have done. And we sustain ourselves on keeping, basically on advertising and subscriptions and counter sales. And we keep our costs very, very low. So
Which you do how?
by having just the bare basics.
Okay.
So
I know Gulzar is a huge fan of The Little magazine because he often talks about, you should read The Little magazine, he's told me many times. You also enter a lot of poetry in The Little magazine?
we publish a lot of
Does he contribute?
Gulzar Saab has been an extremely supportive contributor, and I'm very grateful to him and a lot of our other contributors who have been so supportive.
So do you look at The Little magazine as a news magazine or as literature? Where
It's
does
a
it
bit
fall?
of both. It's not a news magazine actually. We are looking at where news doesn't go anymore, because we live in a seamless reality. We don't, we don't say, all right, that is hunger, that's a news issue. So when we deal with hunger in The Little magazine, we'll have poetry, short stories, maybe novellas,
But no
and
interviews with
essays.
economists.
Absolutely, but not news snippets. We're not into snippets. We're into in-depth analysis, whether it's through creative writing like fiction or poetry, which I think is also analysis of a kind.
News is the first draft of history. A lot of people think the first drafters of history are really flawed. Do you think the first draft of social history is being written better than the first draft of factual history, like news is writing?
News you're calling factual history, and literature
and
social
poetry.
history. I would call both social history. There's no history without facts. So it would be social history recollected in tranquility would be, poetry and fiction or whatever. And news would be more immediate. But the immediacy of news has its own importance as well. We do need that immediacy.
Right.
One
So it's not
is
like you're
not,
a critic of news that it's
no,
not intelligent.
not at all. News is very important. News analysis, as we see in newspapers and news channels, those are important unless we sort of get carried away by the...
Which we do often.
All the time, yes. But as a genre, news and as a genre news analysis, these are important.
Did you ever work yourself in news, in mainstream news?
I was a journalist for many, many years. With Hindustan Times and with Indian Express, before that with Anand Bazar Panchika.
I see. So you were a hardcore news person who is now in the parts of news
I was,
which
yes.
news neglects.
Yeah, in fact, that's why I was senior editor of Hindustan Times when I quit and started this magazine.
And why did you quit?
Well, there comes a point in your life when you when you want to think about what you're doing. I was over 30, and I decided that this is not what I had got into journalism for.
What had you got into journalism for?
I had got into journalism to actually understand our country better, understand our situation
And you
better, our
didn't
world better.
as a journalist?
I didn't think that news media, the way it was, could actually convey all of that to the reader, because we were too controlled by the demands of ad revenue, by the demands.
So you don't
of,
believe that's a decay that's happened today, which many people think that this is today's occurrence?
It's not today's. It's
been there
happened
forever.
a long time. Yes.
I see.
I quit in 1998.
Okay.
And
That was before the television news channels had come. So this is before this whole 24-hour news came about.
Absolutely.
Okay. And when you were in news, did you like most about it, reporting?
Well, I'm still in news, and in a sense, because
As a
I write
reporter, let's
columns.
put it that way.
When I was, I loved it. I loved the going out, meeting people, being in new situations, examining, our reality, seeing life unfold, covering, what we at that time thought were important stories, elections, all kinds of things that now you look back and you think really not very important.
But in one sense-
at that time it was.
But in one sense, do you think news today has a lot more freedom than it did back then? Because there was always the fear of the government. Like we saw how Tehelka was shut down. We saw how many news stories were easily killed back then, before the internet came along, before television news
Yes.
came along. Do you think that has changed?
I think it has definitely changed. Internet has had a huge effect, because you can't spike anymore. If you what happened earlier was, if you spiked a story, then the reporter would give it to a friend in a
Try to
rival
put it in
newspaper
another,
or somebody, a channel, so that it came out somewhere else. So the story itself wasn't killed, but the reporter's story did not appear the way he or she wanted it. Now, internet has made that impossible, because you can always put it up. But don't forget that internet also has its limits, because internet is not always paying.
Right.
And you can't, if you are asked to choose between publishing a so-called spiked story on the net and keeping your job, you might wish to keep your job.
Sure.
So there is a self-censorship also that we do,
Right.
which is finally the censorship that we see outside. Because even why did news media get into this situation? Because once you are in a decision-making position, then you decide the way you are expected to decide. So you carry stories which you are expected to carry.
Sure.
So that there is a self-censorship working, and whether or not there's internet and other venues, you will always have that fear, and you will always have that censorship, unless you are actively aware of it and trying to fight against it.
Are there any journalists who you really admire or appreciate, or any stories that they did that have an impact on you?
I really admire the journalists who work in small towns, where they stay within the situation they're writing about, and for them to expose crime and expose wrongdoing, staying within that society, I think that takes huge courage, and our reporters are always doing that from very many places. A lot of them are not even paid well. A lot of them are stringers.
Yeah.
A lot of them, as a result, don't even get the credit, because the credit goes to the
The faces
The-
of the big
yeah.
faces of journalism. There's space in print for something like the Little magazine. Do you see electronic media having that kind of space, where there are longer format documentaries or in-depth analysis of issues, or you haven't seen that yet?
Well, the medium itself defines the form, doesn't it? Television is not geared towards very long programs. unless you have a lot of interactivity and
Or the BBC, because it's state funded, they can afford to do some very long format stuff. They had like
yeah,
things like the reporters.
yeah, so I don't think we'll have. We do have a lot of news stories and documentaries on TV, but I mean, it also depends on what you call long. Would you
Sure.
call a 1 hour program long, or would you call it short?
Well, in news, I guess 1 hour is the longest slot you'll get.
Exactly.
So yeah, so that's relative. Okay, what's your favorite publication? Which one do you read? Which is the first one you pick up in the morning?
I still pick up the Indian Express in the morning.
Because you work there.
I worked in Indian Express for many years. I worked in Hindustan
just a habit
Times.
you
I
find hard to
yeah,
break, is
I
it?
know, but it's still my first paper, Indian
I
Express.
see. I see. Thanks so much for your time.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it. Bye.